Hi everyone, I'm Keith DeStone, and I'm here again with Claudia and Greg and Hélène and Lenny this time, and we're here to talk about heroes, and in particular the Bacchae of Euripides. Um, so let's go for it. Where should we start? We have a lot of things a lot of entry points here. I know I have my favorite things about this tragedy,
Well,
but should we start by looking at a text?
yes,
Well, let me
Great.
share. Are we going to do that first one? Let
Sure.
me.
Yeah. One of the texts we talked about was that text A,
Mhm.
which was quite long. So as you pull that up, Greg, would you like to introduce us to the key term?
yes. I think the best key term here is agon. And agon is, if you think of the linguistic background of this word agon, it should mean nothing more than coming together. So the great philosopher Nietzsche used to say that, oh, it's the agonistic spirit of the Greeks. When Greeks come together, they compete. Well, you know what? Most societies, whether they're traditional or not, um, have the similar mentality. And as an athlete friend of mine pointed out, um, there's an English word which comes very close in meaning to agon, and that's the word meet, as in a meet where athletes compete with each other. And yet the word meet just means people getting together. So anyway, that's the basic meaning. But then it's true that the other meaning is competition. And then to make it more interesting, a competition that has to do with reenacting pain. And and again, the English borrowing helps, just as you have antagonism that shows you the idea of competition. That's a nice English word. How about the English word agony, where you're really thinking about not just suffering, but suffering that's larger than life. And guess what? Agon, which is definitely what you see in text A, when Dionysus, who has not yet been recognized by Pentheus, the persecutor, Dionysus is saying to Pentheus, you're heading off to an agon. You're heading off to, is it a meet? Is it just a meeting place? Or is it a competition with the god? Because there is antagonism between Pentheus and Dionysus, who are, after all, cousins. They're first cousins. And yet one of them is the defender of the establishment, which is the city of Thebes, and the law and order of Thebes, and the king of Thebes, therefore the body politic of Thebes. And the other one is the outsider, the one who comes from a place where people wear, I'm making this up, earrings or or unconventional hair or whatever it is. And yet the irony is, of course, that Dionysus is a native son, just as Pentheus is a native son. It's just that this is a native son who is not recognized by his own people. And so they're going to get punished for it, especially the king.
Hmm.
And
So, okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Say more.
just a little bit more is since we've talked in earlier meetings, not meets, in earlier meetings about Aeschylus, whom we recognized as a social optimist. There he is in 458 BCE, and what could be a more optimistic way of saying, well, we're past the dysfunctional age of heroes when you had dysfunctional kings. We're now a democracy and we have trial by jury. We don't have vendetta anymore. And I could just go on and on about the social optimism. Then you fast forward in time, you get to Sophocles. Um, and, you know, in the Oedipus Tyrannos, let's say people are right who think that it was staged in 429 BCE, right after the plague, which was much worse than COVID, which was 430 BCE. And there, Oedipus as the king of Thebes, and therefore the embodiment of society, is saying, well, I know that you're sick and I'm sick just as you are because I'm the body politic. I'm really sick. And so, gee, if the medium of tragedy is borrowed from Thebes, and I think that's a historical fact, um, then then in a sense, the fact that what used to be in 458 the medium for celebrating the ideal society, which would be a polis, a city-state, which is, in the case of Athens, democracy. Athens claims to be the inventor of democracy. Well, then, for heaven's sake, this is pretty pessimistic. Then we go all the way down to Euripides. People are guessing that he died in 406 BCE, which means that the Bacchae must have been originally composed for production before 406. But where was it first performed? It was performed in Macedonia, north of Athens, and Macedonia was already a kingdom, a monarchy. And so obviously, how shall I say it? Euripides is the protege of a king when the Bacchae is first produced. Okay, it's true that it was staged in Athens in 401 BCE, by which time the democracy that had come apart in 404 was restored and had been restored for a couple of years already. But you can't really say that Euripides is a social optimist, and yet the Bacchae etiologizes itself, mythologizes itself as the very first tragedy that ever was, except for us, because we don't have any complete tragedy as late as this, unless you think of Oedipus at Colonus. It's fair to say this is the last tragedy, the last complete tragedy that has come down to us through the medieval textual tradition. Sure, there are big chunks of other tragedies by Euripides, but it's fair to say that even if Nietzsche calls well, Nietzsche thinks of tragedy, birth of tragedy, as something that we need to think about. Euripides is already thinking of the birth of tragedy, except this is the last tragedy. And I love the fact that in Athenian democratic mythologization, the very first tragedy, which would have been borrowed from Thebes, the very first tragedy that was produced in Athens was the Pentheus. Wow. And who was the proto poet composer who put together and directed the Pentheus? It was somebody called Thespis, Thespis, which gives us the word thespian. So it's like the proto-dramatist creating the proto-tragedy, which is all about Pentheus. And we've certainly seen before that penthos is not just sorrow, suffering, and I mean larger than life suffering and causing sorrow, but it's also lament. So everything comes together. You have Pentheus, Mr. Lamentation, about to be dismembered by his own mother and aunts, and therefore society is disconnected now because the body politic is dismembered. Wow, this is pessimistic in a way, but is it? Is it?
Mhm.
Okay. Can I ask, I'm thinking about the way that you're talking about the way that this is playing with sequencing, and that there's a view from beginning to end, and about connection. It's really making you think about making me think about some of the work that you've done, Lenny. And I wonder if anything is coming up for you with regard to that as we hear Greg talking about this. Oh, you're muted.
In other words, this tragedy, which founds, in a way, it's the founding tragedy for the institution of tragedy, is also the telos of tragedy, right?
Yes.
So it has that kind of multiple layers of irony to it, and there's also lots of allusions and self-conscious allusions to drama in it, right? I mean, to the way in which the Pentheus gets dressed up and all of that, and the costuming and so forth and so on. Not to dwell on the obvious, but it is amazing that it's the myth is about the founding of tragedy, and as well as being the end of it. I also think that what you said about Thebes is very interesting. Even historically being the origin of tragedy, but it's also a way in which you could represent Athens without it being Athens, right?
Yes.
It serves as an other that's a mirror to the city state itself, right? And that it's a way in which Euripides can show Athenians what they look like.
Yes,
Right?
and I so agree, dear Lenny. And the thing is, I only woke up to this a couple of years ago,
Uh-huh.
after having dealt with this amazing masterpiece for so many years, as you have as well.
Yep.
And what amazes me is that up till 510 BCE, I'm full of dates today.
Yeah.
BCE, which
Yeah.
is when the democracy started, or at least that's the way democratic Athens explains itself. Oh, we started as a democracy. It's much more complex, but we started as a democracy in 510 BCE when we threw out the tyrants. Well, what I kind of woke up to is, wait a minute, um, these so-called tyrants, the Pisistratidae, were actually allied with Thebes, and they got along with Thebes, the city that becomes one of the primary enemies of the city-state of Athens.
Yeah.
So the thing is that there was a reason why Thebes is so important with its mythology for the Athenians, and in a sense, what I think maybe people in the days of Aeschylus in 558 don't fully comprehend is once upon a time, um, this medium was a medium that expressed alliance with the city to the north, Thebes, and with lots of cultural borrowing, and or at least lots of cultural exchange. And all that, of course, is changed with the democracy, and pretty much during the entire 5th century, which we call the classical period, Thebes is an enemy. You really have to think long and hard when they're not enemies in the classical period and even the post-classical period. So they're just not on the same wavelength. But in terms of a medium like tragedy, which starts under the tyrants, and a medium like tragedy uh, will mean different things, as Lenny can tell us better than I can. Tyrannos is just a foreign word, and a word from Asia Minor, a Lydian word for king, but what it means in the era of the democracy is an unconstitutional ruler.
Yep. Yep. Who
And
violates all kinds of taboos.
yes, and who claims to be a king,
Yeah.
claims to be the body politic, but he's really sick.
Yeah.
And he makes the society sick, and he should be expelled.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. But Lenny, since you mentioned telos, which is this wonderful word, we won't have time to talk about the Hippolytus, but I love to look at Hippolytus as a kind of cleaner version of Euripides because it's decades earlier
Right.
when it was produced. And there, I would say the best word to think of there is telos. And there you have Hippolytus, this super athlete, great charioteer, so it's prestigious athletics, um, who is, how shall I say it, such a fan of the goddess Artemis that he neglects the goddess Aphrodite. And so at the beginning of the Hippolytus, and let's not go there, we don't need to look at the text now, but he talks about telos as if it were just a straight line from A to B is I'm living a life and I'm living a holy life because I'm so devoted to Artemis. Oops, I forgot Aphrodite. But anyway, I'm devoted to Artemis. And just as a chariot driver eventually reaches a finish line, so also I hope that my life will be a nice finishing off of my life. And so he's thinking of telos in a linear way as I go from A to B, and A is the starting line and B is the finish line. Even if you go around a turning post and keep going around and around, eventually you go back to your starting point. But wait a minute, is that really a line or is it a circle? It's really, you start at point A and you go circle around back to point A. But he doesn't understand that because he's thinking of telos only in a linear way, end of the line, whereas it's really a circle in terms of ritual. And Lenny can tell us so much about ritual as a frame of myth. And so I like the way, right at the beginning of that drama, he doesn't understand telos, and he just doesn't get it. And yet, in a sense, his life, which leads to a grisly death. Again, it's almost dismemberment because he's just so shall we say uh, what's the expression? He's almost like dismembered because of that horrible chariot accident that is brought upon him by the gods. Um, and what I love about that is that if you read somebody like Pausanias, who is less shy about the mysteries of heroes, why we worship them, because even though they all have to die, they can be recycled after death and become immortal. Pausanias gives it away in the 2nd century CE versus where we are now, the 5th century BCE. So that's about half a millennium away. He gives it away. He gives it away because he says, well, I asked the local folk in Trozen, where Hippolytus has his #1 worship, and Keith is a big expert on the worship of
I've been there, yeah.
because he actually drove all the way from northern Greece and Thessaloniki in a rented car and visited, shall we say, the shrine of Hippolytus way down south. But anyway, what I love about the shall we say the outcome is Pausanias when he's asking, well, so what happened? What do you think about Hippolytus being dismembered in this chariot crash? And and Pausanias, because he's interviewing these priests and priestesses and real experts in the local myths and rituals of Trozen, they say, well, we wish that he didn't really die. Well, that's Pausanias projecting. He did die. And they say, they don't quite say it, but then they kind of admit to him, oh, Asclepius, who is the, shall we say, the patron hero and eventually patron god of all physicians, he was such a good physician that he brought Hippolytus back to life. And by the way, if you want to see what an immortalized Hippolytus looks like, just look up at the sky and the charioteer in the sky, which I think Zodiac called the Auriga.
Auriga, yes.
That's Hippolytus. And he, you know what he says, Lenny? He says, And so they're talking, and he quotes them, "Hutos ekenos." This one, the
Is
one
that
we
one?
worship, is that one up in the sky.
Yeah.
Well, Aristotle tells us that hutos ekenos is the way mimesis works as real reenactment, where you just you just bring back, shall we say, the life and times of a hero to your own time, and that's mimesis. And Aristotle says, oh, that's saying tuto ekeno or hutos ekenos, which in Greek means this is that.
Mhm.
And then I teased in this the day version of Heroes, where Keith and I have worked a lot with college students. I love to ask those of them who are Latin fans, how do you say yes in vulgar Latin? And they're stumped. But the way to say it is hoc illud. This is that. Hoc illud, which then becomes in French, oui,
Yeah.
or in Southern French, oc,
Ok.
as in Languedoc, the language of oc, which is hoc illud. So, but I'm sorry to make that distraction but it's not a distraction by referring to Euripides as Hippolytus. But since you brought up so beautifully the meaning of telos, um, again, going back to the Bacchae, it's all about coming full circle. And here's something that again, only in my old age, it was like a eureka moment where saying, wait a minute, Greg, what is this text telling you? Why haven't you seen this before? It has to do with that amazing, and Claudia and Keith, let's not even, we don't have time maybe to look at all the text, but could I just say it's where the chorus is singing and dancing, this moment where somebody is coming up from a hollow stalk, um, and there's a puff of smoke, and next thing there's fire, and then out pops uh, Dionysus. And in that same vein, it turns out, and this is something that everybody knew, but most people who study the Bacchae have never been told, which is that Dionysus himself was dismembered by the Titans. Not only was he dismembered, he was then eaten raw. I hate to think of how he got then reconstituted because he was eaten raw by the Titans. But I'm saying, however it happened, he gets reassembled and resurrected. And people say, but wait a minute, gods don't die. Well, Olympian gods don't die, but remember, Dionysus is the latest of Olympian gods. He's kind of initiated. And there's certain city-states like Delphi where he still dies in the local mythological narrative. He dies and then comes
Mm.
back to life. So he's a dying god, like most Near Eastern gods, like the prototype of Adonis. Uh, Gods do die. It's only Olympian gods that become exempt if they become members of the club and live on Mount Olympus. And eventually Dionysus does. But let's get real. He's the prototype for the dismemberment of Pentheus. I
Yeah.
just love that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, just this is to get back to the concept of telos and what we were talking about before
Yeah.
in Aeschylus, okay,
Oh
where
my
where
God.
whether this is social optimism or not, or social and political optimism. I mean, the Bacchae tells you that tragedy is about complete disruption of people's thinking, right?
Yes.
And that's its point of origin is to dismember the city state and its ideas, but then there's the other component, which is the reassembling of it afterwards, right?
Yes.
And so you can't say that Euripides is a pessimist. It has to do with
Yeah.
the
I
value
agree.
of thinking out of the box, so to speak, and of destroying the conventional ideas and then trying to put something together, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And because when we deal with Greek literature, usually most people know Latin literature much more. And so one thing I've lately um, started to do a lot is another second century CE character, a Greek character, and this is Plutarch, who is almost a contemporary of Pausanias. And Plutarch was, after all, he was a priest of Apollo, and he, like Pausanias, tends to ignore Roman things. But when he does talk about Roman things, uh, he can zero in, priest that he was, on aspects that you just don't get in Latin literature, not even in Livy. So I can do a 1 minute summary of the story of Romulus, the first king of Rome. Okay, so I want you to imagine Romulus being assassinated by the senators in the proto-senate. So the proto-king is assassinated by the proto-senators, and he is dismembered, and each member of the Roman Senate takes a piece of the body back home with them. And wow, you don't see anything like that in Roman literature, but Plutarch knows this Roman myth, and it's pretty, shall we say, hair-raising, and and Roman sources tiptoe around it, but not Plutarch. So what's the implication here? It's exactly what you say, Lenny, which is that disassembly leads to reassembly, because every time the Roman Senate meets in later times, in a sense, what they're doing is they're each of them bringing back a proto member of what was dismembered. And so the meat, and again, I say the meeting, the coming together, is a reassembly of the king, therefore a reassembly of the body politic, a reassembly of society. And I quite agree that maybe we shouldn't say that that Euripides is a social pessimist, but let's just say that this could be an affirmation of royalty, not so much democracy. And to me, that's pessimistic.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just me being playful.
Okay.
I like that. So I'm wondering, there is a specific passage, since we've been talking about telos, that's kind of interesting, that has a word that I think also deals with some of the way we opened our discussion. I'm wondering, would you be open to looking at that?
Oh, wow. Yes, what a treat.
And Keith is going to share, it's a Word document, okay? And you'll see the stuff in purple is a focus passage, Greg. So that's the part that you yourself had translated. This is taken from
Yes.
the source book from our project.
Yes.
And so, and you can see telos right there, right around 860 at the end of that line.
Yep.
And so the idea that I think him becoming a god is essentially what's happening here, is the telos, right?
Exactly, exactly. Claudia, that's wonderful. I love it. Yes, exactly.
It's asserting his divinity. Yes, for sure. Yep.
But I was,
You
please
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
I
you
was
go ahead.
hoping, you may have more to say about that. I was hoping you might also want to talk to us about that last word, apios. And because we've been talking a lot about disconnection,
Yes.
I'm wondering how you would think about that word.
Well, do you mind if I become a nerdy linguist here? And I had worked with a brilliant, then young person. She will be forever young, but her name is Susan Edmonds, and she actually wrote an entire PhD dissertation on this word apios, and its negative, nepios. So it turns out apios is a back formation, and nepios, which is usually translated as fool or simpleton, and people think it's derived, not derived, well, yeah, people think it's derived from a combination that is similar to a combination in the Latin language, and Latin and Greek all derived from a so-called proto-language called Indo-European. And in Latin, people used to think that nepios, which is the negative of apios, is something like Latin in fons, where in is negative and fons is speaking. So an infant, an infans, is somebody who is yet inarticulate, cannot speak, is a non-speaker, right? But it turns out, as Susan Edmonds proved in her dissertation, which later became a monograph, that nepios is more related. If you want to compare it with a Latin word, it would be ineptus, which gives us English borrowing inept. But the root up, which you see in the Latin verb apiscor, which means to connect, shows us that basically the root up, which means connect, means that nepios is disconnected, whereas apios is connected. But the trouble is, when you look it up in a Greek to English dictionary, you're supposed to translate it as kind, gentle, and wait a minute, so what do we do here? The closest thing we can get to a 5th century understanding is gentle. However, when you look at Homeric poetry tells you what kind of gentleness this is. And I still remember the expression, epios hoste pater, which means connected like a father. So when a father is a good father, like Keith, then he is gently connected to the young ones. And that gives the young ones an opportunity to grow up connected to the ancestors, because the father and the mother are both really ancestors going all the way back. And so the idea is, and I used to just bluff about this, but it turns out that the three qualifications for connectedness are attested in Iranian traditions in Avestan. So what I thought was a bluff was not a bluff. And here are the 3 qualifications for connectedness. You have to say it in 5th century Greek, sophos, which means you have the intelligence to make connections, to connect the dots. You have to be agathos, you have to be morally connected to your predecessors, your ancestors. And third, this is the hardest, you have to be philos. You have to be near and dear. And all of you know, we've all of us had adventures with the meaning of the word philos in the sense of connectedness by way of emotional nearness. And the closer you are emotionally to somebody, the more your identity is formed. But Lenny, Keith, Claudia, Hélène, you could say that so much better. So anyway, what I'm saying is this really nails it, this passage, because Dionysus is the connector and is really a loving connector. We think of him as very scary, but in the end, it's no wonder that Dionysus is the one god that both men and women can relate to equally. And you could pretty much make that statement if you look at the kind of piety that people express towards Dionysus. So he's scary only about the other side, shall we say? But maybe I should stop talking about the other side.
I mean, that's so fascinating that he is the god that is both terrifying and is the connector. And since we're talking about this important connection between a parent figure and an individual, and the importance of that, I mean, I think that has implications in terms of the overall play, because it's his mother that is the one who's going to dismember him, right? Pentheus. So
yes.
that is so that it is especially horrible, I guess, right? Both not just because of the, yeah, sorry. I mean, I think there's a long tradition within ancient Greek poetry that to see your child killed, it's a kind of a ritual blinding. There are all special circumstances about it. To see your brother's head roll on the field of battle is especially traumatizing. But also, I think then within the context of this play, with these figures that we're talking about, Pentheus
I
being
love it.
dismembered by the mother. Yeah.
So Claudia,
Lenny, please.
I'm sorry. You were addressing Lenny. Why don't we do that first, and then I have a piece of agenda about text A.
Oh, fun. Okay. Lenny, I was just saying you were nodding, so I was wondering if just a general agreement, or do you have something you'd like to share?
No, but I mean, but the contradictoriness of this God is a real crucial thing, right? That he's the. I think I wouldn't rule out gentleness from the 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 tragic meaning of apios, right? It's scary and reassuring like a dad. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's that combination of things, which is so disruptive and difficult to understand, right?
Yes.
He's the
Yes.
native
Yeah.
son who's also looks like the foreigner. He's full of these, and he's both male and female in his attributes, right?
Oh
That's
yeah.
what that's so, and he appeals to both young and old, right?
Yeah.
It's a bringing together of contradictions
Yes.
that's what's important and so difficult to get your head around, right?
Including native and foreign,
Yeah,
native and
exactly.
alien.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's the native son, but he's the outsider, the
Yeah.
outlier
Yeah.
threat that that leads to, shall we say, the dismemberment.
Right, right. I
But
mean,
it also leads to the reconnecting.
yeah. I mean, it's so important to think that Pentheus and he are in a way mirror images of each other too,
Yes,
right? Yep.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I hate to bring in popular media that shows my age, but um, Keith and I were talking at one point about Twisted Sister, which is a very old rock and roll theme now. It's shall we say, Twisted Sister are getting really long in the tooth, and so am I. But there's one moment in the clip for We're Not Going to Take It where the persecutor, who's in this case the father, and he's a bad father, he's heading up the stairs, and meanwhile Dionysus, let's say, or Twisted Sister, um, is facing him coming downstairs, and the faces meet, and at that point Dionysus just pushes him down the stairs, and it's the meeting of the faces that brings me to this wonderful fact about the face of Dionysus. Dionysus is not so much the god of wine, he's the god of achieving balance, even when you have mind altering substances like wine. You have to check
Yeah.
it with water, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, he's the god of theater, theater in the sense that I'm thinking of the etymology of theatron, theater, which is a means for seeing, not seeing every day, but visualizing beyond the everyday. And how do you do that? The Greek word is prosopon, which means not only mask in the theater, it also means person, a personhood, who you are. And I love the fact that in Latin, persona is not only person, but also, again, theatrical masks.
Mask.
You have
Yeah.
a very similar thing. But one more thing, when you really think about it, the only person who doesn't have a face is Dionysus, because his face is the mask of theater, and the mask doesn't hide, it projects. I mean, sure, it blocks the everyday, which is the face behind the mask, but the mask itself is the projection of visualization in theater. It is theater, and he is the god of theater. But Claudia, if we have time, or Claudia or Keith, whichever of you controls text A, can we look at the very last lines of text A? And you have to go scroll way down. Okay. Um, but could one of you um, maybe, I don't know, Hélène, with feeling, can you read starting at 971 where Dionysus is talking? Yeah, all the way down to
a man of terror,
Yeah.
Dionysus. You are a man of terror, and you are going after experiences that are things of terror. The result will be that you will find a glory, chaos, reaching all the way up to the sky. Hold out your hands.
No, that will, I think that will hold us. So, Hélène, may I challenge you? Is after all, when we start usually a journey, shall we say, a journey of the soul through Greek literature, we start with Homeric Iliad, and there's that line in Iliad, scroll 9, line 413, where Achilles says that what defines him as the hero of his own epic, which is the Iliad, is Kleos, a Kleos that is imperishable, unwilting. And then here's this Kleos that Pentheus has. Wow, have we come a long way, or have we? What do you think, Hélène?
Yes, indeed. But you know, at the end of this tragedy, there is also the
Yes.
notion of beauty. You know, what is beautiful?
Yes.
Yes. So you've got why at the end does Euripides bring out the concept of what is beautiful? You know,
Oh, I'm
what is
so
beautiful is dear, you know, Filos
yes.
forever. So he associates the idea of beauty
Yes.
with
Yes.
the end
Oh,
and
I'm
the
so glad. Oh, that's so brilliant that you bring that connection here. That's so important, dear Hélène. And I think of the fact that we're talking about Thebes as the, shall we say, the quote unquote origin of tragedy. All right. So it's interesting that in Theognis, where the people of Megara think of Thebes as the mother city, go figure. Uh, there's this wonderful poem in Theognis where the term is it's a wedding of Cadmus with his bride, and I won't tell you the name of the bride yet. And it goes, "Hoti kalon philonesti, todou kalon ou philonesti." Whatever is beautiful is philon, is near and dear. It's connected in an emotional way, and what is not beautiful is not philon. And then guess what? In Euripides, the chorus sings, Hotikalon philonae. Whatever is beautiful is philon, near and dear, forever. And forever in a cyclical way. It keeps coming back. Every time you encounter the kalon, it will be philon forever in a circular way. Wow. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Wow. I mean, I think that's a kind of beautiful place if we wanted to end this conversation for today. Are there any other thoughts that someone want to share or to
Did you
close us
hear,
out?
Claudia, did you all hear Claudia say, we've come to an end? Is it a telos? Is it a telos?
It is a telos. I think it's a beautiful telos that we could pick up and continue our conversation from next time. Yeah, I'm still thinking about everything we talked about. That was a lot. There's a lot to absorb there. So, you know, why don't I just invite people? You know, maybe there are comments from the community. Maybe they have questions. And when this video goes live, I hope they'll post those questions. And we can dialogue with the community.
And Claudia, it doesn't have to be a question. It could be an insight.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Where you test an insight on people who are sympathetic, who are, you know, who knows who is right and who is wrong about so many things because it's such a complex medium. And I know that we all love dialogue.
100%.
Yeah.
What a wonderful, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll just close this out by saying thank you to everyone for joining us. Thanks, Keith, Hélène, Lenny, and Greg, and anyone
Thank
who's
you.
watching in the community. Thanks so much for joining us. And we look forward to continuing our conversations very soon. All right, friends, let me just say, sometimes after our conversation stops, we start talking about something that's so beautiful, we decide we have a little outtake that we want to share. So Greg, can you talk a little bit about the other name, another name for Dionysus?
Yes, and I really need the help of Keith because Keith and I have tried this on college students, which are a subsection of our community. So many of us are not college students, but Keith, I'm really relying on you here. But
Okay.
it really has to do with. I'll start with the, shall we say, nerd linguist point of view, which is Bacchus, which is Backhos if we transliterate the original Greek, but it's Bacchus if we look at the Latinized version, and we pronounce that in English Bacchus. That name, unlike the name Dionysos, is applied not only to the god, but whoever uh, is in communion with the god. And uh, when you worship the god, what you do is you're in physical and mental communion with the god. Just very quickly, the physical part, you think of the fact that in worship of Dionysus, there's not only the factor of drinking wine mixed with water so that there's equilibrium, but there's also eating of bread. Uh, and that is why Dionysus has as his female analog Demeter, who's the goddess of bread, or shall we say the goddess of grain. And those of you who happen to have been raised Christian will know that a lot of the language involving the worship of Dionysus um, involves what can be called, and try to think of it in a pre-Christian way, communion, being together, which is what communion means. And it's through the ingesting of wine and bread, which are the microcosm of sea and earth, as in, because Dionysus is also the god of the sea when the sea turns to wine. But I'm getting away from the point that I want to get to, which is the name Bacchus. The fact that, okay, physically, um, it's understandable that Bacchus is both the name of the god, or let's say the epithet of the god, and the the epithet of a worshiper of the god. But let's get now into the mental part, not the physical part. I love the fact that when you are in communion with Dionysus, and Dionysus then can be called Bacchus, and the communicant can be called Bacchus. When you're in that state, you are in an altered mental state. And the Greek word for that is entheos, Entheos, which means having the God, the theos, inside you. It's having the God inside. Well, isn't it nice that a compound of that, I'll say it in Greek, enthusiasmos, which is having the God inside and how it feels. And that's where we get the word enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is having the God inside. So I'm just fascinated with the fact that this masculine adjective, bakos, if you now switch from masculine to feminine, is Bacchae, and the plural of that is Bacchae, which is, and the way we Latinize Bacchae, which in Greek transliteration would be Backhai, as Bacchae. And there you have it, the title of this tragedy. But when you think about that title, what is it referring to? Is it referring to the mother and the sisters of the mother? And we're talking about the mother and aunts of Pentheus, who dismember the son/nephew, or are we talking about the chorus? The thing is, the chorus are perfectly functional. They're good-looking boys who are so good-looking that they look like girls. There's nothing wrong with the appearance of a perfect ritual reenactment of Dionysiac worship. So the chorus are just perfect. It's Pentheus himself who, when he appears to Dionysus, showing himself off as he has now costumed himself as a devotee of Bacchus, he doesn't look good. Tennessee Williams would make him look like Blanche Dubois, and I've seen too many, I think, rather boring Blanche Dubois representations of Pentheus. No, the point is that he's not good looking because he's not ritually beautiful. He's not perfect the way when Hélène was talking about beauty. I'm so glad, Hélène, you brought it up. He's not that. So he is grotesque. And oh, my cosmos is off. And cosmos sure is macrocosm, but it's also the microcosm of cosmos can also mean cosmetics, including having a good hair day versus a bad hair day. And he has a bad hair day. He has a bad body day. He's not dressed correctly. He is shall we say, off. So Keith, how am I doing? I want you to have the last word because you and I have tried to grapple with this wonderful ambivalence of Bacchus as both the god and the devotee of the god.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in this microcosm, we see, oh gosh, how can I say it? The past and the present all mixed together. The mythic and the ritual all mixed together.
Yes.
There's this formula that you repeat in the ancient Greek hero in 24 hours a number of times, and also when we've taught this, in person. But the formula is there's dysfunction in myth versus good, positive function in ritual. In the past, heroes did things wrong, they messed up, but in the present, they're the key to connection, to pick up a word from before, with the divine, with the social connection, connection with the environment, all sorts of ways, seasonality. And so in this tragedy, we see the hero going wrong. Pentheus is having a bad day. He's not the model for how to worship Dionysus.
Yes.
But the Bacchae, the ones who deserve that name, who are in communion with Dionysus in this tragedy, they are the model.
Yes.
How to
Yes.
relate.
And actually, to be historical, to be a nerd historian about this, in general, titles of tragedies usually have to do with the role of the chorus. So in the ancient world, Bacchae, the Bacchae, are the chorus. They're not the dysfunctional mother and aunts of Pentheus, or at least the primary reference is that. And this gives us an opportunity. Again, this is in honor of Hélène. When you mentioned beauty, I love the fact that when Cadmus marries his bride, and that's how society starts in Thebes, which then becomes the model for society, at least before 510 BCE, okay? When Cadmus marries his bride, it's the muses and the charites who are, the presiding over the beauty and the pleasure of music, can I say? It's the charites and the muses, who are the goddesses of music, who sing the song, Oti kalon philon esti, todou kalon ou philon esti. Whatever is beautiful is philon, whatever is not beautiful is not philon. And here it comes. And I know we all have to go away and stop for now, but what's the name of the bride? The name of the bride is Harmonia. And harmonia is in the ancient world is not harmony. It's more specific. It's the tuning of a 7-string lyre, which is the perfect tune. If you tune a 7-string lyre the perfect way, that is harmonia. And the root of that is again ar, which means fit, join together, commune. How is that? So the bride of Cadmus, at the wedding of Cadmus and Harmonia, which initiates society, is the tuning of the lyre to make beautiful music.
Well, I didn't think we could have a more beautiful ending before, but you just did it. So I'm glad this is our second telos, an even more beautiful turning. So thank you, Greg. Thank you for taking us on that journey. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And now you know, whenever we say we're saying goodbye in the video, just look to see if there's some more coming. You'll see that there's the conversation always continues. So until next time.
To be continued.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.